My name is Alison McCall. I'm the director of I'm going to sit part of the time because it feels like it's been a long day. I'm the director of the University Counselling program here at the St. Michael's University School. I do work primarily in the senior school. I have advisees. At the moment, we have our advisees in grade 10 through 12. So if you have older children in the senior years, then that's some of them have either gotten to know me or perhaps will come to know me. I'm also a parent at the school. I have two children. I have two girls, one in grade 6 and one in kindergarten. So I am acutely aware that some of this information is you're not maybe quite needing it yet in terms of the level of detail. Some of you, I know, were at the presentation last week that we did for the senior school parents and provided a lot of detail about how to apply and different application systems and costs and all those kinds of things. I'm not going to give you any of that tonight because I know that, well, 6 or 4 years from now, the information is going to change and could even change quite dramatically. So I'm not going to give it to you. If you want that information, please feel free to ask as we go along anytime. If you want to have, if you have a question that pops into your mind, I'm happy to have this more of a conversation than a stand and deliver. So we have here at SMU, we have our first our mission statement, and right in there is that idea about that preparation for higher learning and for life. So that's what my job is in the senior school, or how I see my job with the school, is to help students figure out where they might like to go, how they might like to get there. The University Counselling Department has 4 people in it, all university counselors. We're all people who have come into the job by way of other routes. All of us have been teachers, and a couple of English teachers. I think there's Miss Casey who used to teach PE and information technology, and many years ago she told me she taught keyboarding. And I've come at it, I had 12 years experience teaching French, always in the independent system. I taught everything from kindergarten to grade 12, and I taught first and second year university French. So I have an interesting kind of perspective on this, having also worked in the admissions department at the University of Victoria. So my very circuitous route into this role is, for me, works really well because it gave me a lot of experience that I can apply to helping students who also are going to probably come at their own university path in a very circuitous way, because that's the way that it gets done these days. Things are a little bit different. So I have, I broke it down into 5 kind of themes that I wanted to touch on tonight. And there's really not much that's going to happen on the screen behind you other than just the title of the theme that I'm going to talk about. But I do really encourage you, if you have questions as we go, please just ask them. You can call them out. You can put your hand up if you want to do that. I'm happy to answer them as we go along. So within our department, one of the things that is really important to us in the work that we do is to try and stay current with what's going on out there, the same way that we pride ourselves at school on staying current with the latest in pedagogical research or in brain research, so that we can figure out how to work with the students to the best of our ability. So for us, part of that is also getting to know what's going on in the world of post-secondary and what's going on in the world of university specifically. And one of the things that's very clear to us, certainly as clear as has been in the 5 years that I've been doing this, is that things are changing. In Canada, if we look at sort of the Canadian post-secondary system, one of the dramatic changes that's happened over the last 10 years is that the line between a college and university is quite blurry now. So there's whereas traditionally people would go to universities to get degrees and would go to colleges and perhaps do technical diplomas or hands-on practical diplomas, there are many colleges now that are able to grant degrees, and they can get students can go to a college and get a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Business Administration or all kinds of things. They tend to still have that focus on practical, hands-on. There's also the balance of theoretical, because in order to become a degree-granting institution, you also have to be able to provide the theory to go along with the practical. But that's one of the things that's really changed in the way that universities in Canada are functioning, and the designation of post-secondary and what that means. And what's happening for us at this point is that as we work with our students especially as they get to grade 12 and are looking at where they're going next, they sometimes are heading towards a path that might lead them down to the road to a college, and yet they're still heading to a 4-year degree, and they're still heading towards a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Engineering Science sometimes. And so students are starting to explore some of these other paths that sometimes as a parent who may, I know even for me, thought, I'm going to go to university, that's what I'm going to do. But now knowing that you can also go and have this other learning experience at the college, that's one of the things that we've really seen shift in the Canadian context, certainly with universities. And we've seen students making choices to go and do degrees at colleges, both locally and across Canada, because there's specific programs that they have that offer them something different than a university might offer them. Colleges, the one sort of standard thing that hasn't changed with most colleges in Canada is that they don't offer housing, residence. So when students do go, that is the one downside for some students, is they don't have that first-year residence experience that they might have if they go to university and live in res with all the other first-year students. And I don't know, how many people here went away to university and did that? One? Couple? Yeah, quite a few. So you know what that's like when you're there and you're perhaps in that first year mix. College does have a much more of a commuter campus feel to it. So students tend to come, do their classes and go. There's there's a wide variety of students at universities as well as at colleges. But that is still true, that the college experience is going to be different from the university experience, but in terms of the education that they're going to get, we see top quality education that comes out of the colleges as well. The instructors, the experience that students have that they report back to us, certainly these days, is great. They often, for the students who choose to go that route, it is the best route for them, and it works really well. In the US, that's in a typical SMU grad class, let's say there's 150 students on average in a grad class these days. So typically we have about 50 students, so about a third of the class will apply to colleges in the United States to go and study in the States. Of that 50, I would say that it varies from year to year, but there's about 20 to 25 students who end up going to a college in the United States. Some of those kids are Americans to start with. Their families, they've either come here for boarding school, or they're dual citizens, or they have connections in the US. Sometimes they're international students, so no matter where they go, they're going to be international. They're going to, whether they go to Canada or whether they go to the US or even Great Britain. So we see a wide variety of students going to the US. And for the American kids, sometimes it's just the familiarity of going home. For lots of our other students, it's the lure of something different, of a different experience. So if you were at the presentation last week, you'll know the answer to this question, but how many institutions are there, post-secondary institutions are there in Canada? Anyone know? Anyone want to hazard a guess? Jane's laughing because she knows the answer. Yeah, she can do it. Any guesses?
500.
There's about 100. There's 100 post-secondary, degree granting college and universities in Canada. There's about 40 traditional universities across the nation here. Anyone want to guess how many there are in the United States, colleges? It's about 4,000, yeah. It's a huge number. So there's a vast array of options in the US. It's like the smorgasbord of college experience. And what's so interesting about that is that it's not to say that the experience students have at Canadian universities wouldn't be different depending on which university they go to, but the experience that you would have at some of those different colleges in the US is so different. And you can go to a college where there are maybe 800 students in the whole college, 200 in each year, first year, second year, third year, fourth year. And you can also go to universities which are the same size as the University of Toronto, which has 70,000 students. So there's really everything to choose from in between. And the experience that students have when they go to the States is a very different college experience. And sometimes that's exactly what they're looking for, is that really unique kind of college experience. Hopefully it's not too much like the movies that sometimes we see. There's a couple of old movies that show college experience in the United States in a certain way, but it is, there's definitely a feeling to those campuses. Each of those campuses that I've visited, you get a different feeling as soon as you walk on them. In Canada, you can have that experience, especially at some of the smaller colleges, the smaller universities in Canada. Acadia, Mount Allison, St. Francis Xavier, some of the ones that are in the maritime provinces, as well as bishops in Quebec, and you will have a very distinct kind of different feeling to it. But a lot of our Canadian universities, as the Dean of Arts at Queen's University was here a couple of years ago doing an orientation event for new students, and the first thing he said, you know, the best thing, he was from Ireland or Scotland, I think. He said the best thing about going to university in Canada is it doesn't matter where you go to university in Canada, you are going to get a great undergraduate degree. It was the very first thing out of his mouth, and it's true. We have such a great standard of education in our public post-secondary institutions. The United States is very different. They have private institutions, they have for-profit institutions, they have not-for-profit institutions, and they have public institutions. So there's a wide variety of choice. And one of the things that we do in our office is try and help stay current with the schools, the kinds of schools that students from SMU typically like to go and visit, like to go and attend, and try and help students who are looking to try and sift through the thousands of schools that they could choose from in the US and decide what's going to be the best school for me, what's going to be the best fit. So what we talk about is trying to figure out what the landscape is at each of those colleges that they might like to apply to and what the fit is. So what are the things that make it that place would be a really good place for that student to go and thrive and excel and carry on doing the things that they really like to do at those places. So it's an interesting, for me, this is absolutely the best job I've ever had. I get to travel. I get to see some really fascinating places around the world, and both in my backyard as well as very far away. And it's constantly changing. What happens out there, the way that the kinds of students they're looking for, the kinds of programs that they're offering, the kinds of degrees and opportunities that kids have these days is astounding. So that's my landscape talk. Any questions? We can move on to the next theme. So as we go out and we travel and we gather information and we try and figure out what do we need to know about this place so I can come home with that information and write a blog post about it or talk to the grade 11s or 10s or 12s, because we teach all of those grades. We teach a little bit of all of those grades. And we try and bring that information back and share that with the students. So it's the way we organize ourselves in the senior school with the university counseling piece is that we start out with our students as academic advisors, which I think is a little less daunting than being their university counselor. So we approach them when they first get connected with one of the 4 people in my office, we're starting with the academic advising piece. So we help them select their courses. We talk with them about what they like to do, what they might like to do down the road. Some kids have a really fixed idea of where they're going and how they want to get there and what they want to do when they get there. And other students will sit in my office and say, I don't know, I have no idea. And either of those is just fine. We take them in, we help them through their immediate choices, if they have immediate choices within their courses. They come to us when they want to change their courses and they change their mind about what they're taking. We communicate with parents and try and keep them in the loop when those changes are happening, especially midway through the school year if things are changing as after that initial sort of settling in period. And we help with students when they're, especially to liaise with learning resources if that's part of the student's life. We work with the boarding parents sometimes when there are issues going on in the boarding house and that are impacting the students, maybe their ability to be successful in their academic day. And we try and support those students. When we start with a student in general, we now stay with them right through to grade 12. So currently we pick them up in the grade 10 year, and then if they're attached to one of us as our advisee, then we stay with them through grade 12. And then as we work through each of those conversations with the kids, we get to know them a little bit better. We are able to ask them questions about what they're interested in, what they like, what they don't like, and then help them kind of fine-tune some of those choices as they go along the way, so that they can have the opportunities they want to have at the end, at the exit, when they're ready to go off to choose some kind of post-secondary opportunity. We have a few online resources that we rely fairly heavily on with the students in terms of gathering information and holding information for them. One of them is called Naviance, and I think some of the middle school students actually this year used it to be able to do an online survey. But it's certainly something that students in grade 9 right through grade 12 use as part of what's called a graduation transition plan, which the Ministry of Education requires for all students in the province of British Columbia. And we just support students to try and create this plan. What is it you're going to do after you graduate, after you leave us here at school? We talk a lot about universities around the world, And so when we're making presentations to students in classrooms, or when I talk to students sitting in my office about what their plans are, we talk about universities in Canada, universities in the United States, universities in Europe, in continental Europe, as well as in Britain. We've seen, we usually have maybe 6 to 8 students a year who might like to go to Britain and study in the United Kingdom. And so we offer them up with this panoply of choice, and hope to kind of spark some imagination of what some of the possibilities are. And then at any time during those years, as we go through those advising pieces, we welcome parents to get involved and to come and have the conversation, talk with us about what the choices are, and to give us information too about your child, about their likes, their dislikes. Sometimes parents have parents always have a unique perspective on their kids that we can use when we're talking with the kids about. Sometimes we can be very persuasive, and parents are thankful because it's not mom or dad saying it, it's somebody else saying it. So sometimes there's a good partnership that can happen that way when parents are involved in the process as we go. We also support students with the sort of tangible pieces of the application process. So when they're heading towards grade 12 and working through those applications for universities, the US has a very intensive application process, which takes many hours and lots of involvement from various people. So as a school counselor, whoever their advisor is, in the American system we'd be called the college counselor, we write a letter for them. The student typically has to ask teachers to write reference letters for them. Sometimes a coach will write a letter of reference for them. And students often seek lots and lots of assistance to try and produce the personal statement or the essays that are required for that application process. So it's a pretty involved process, and we're so lucky here because we have such a great faculty who get involved with students at every stage of that process wherever they need them, whether it's through letters of reference or to help revise that personal statement for the 10th or 12th time. And so we support them all the way through those processes in the hope that by the end of it they have options and they have choices. We have two people in our office that work. Well, one is actually in our office at the moment, who deals specifically with scholarships. So she tries to keep a finger on the pulse of the scholarship opportunities for students. Those are private scholarship opportunities, public scholarships, sometimes even workplace scholarships in terms of the parents' workplace scholarships, and help students through the process when they are applying for those scholarships. Universities have scholarships, but they're also public institutions that have other funded scholarships in the community as well as at educational institutions around the world. So Ms. Casey Ray Casey is the person who helps with the scholarship process and has been doing that admirably for the last 6 or 7 years here. We each year in our grad class of for the last couple of years anyway, in our grad class of about 140 to 160, when we add up the total number of dollars that students have earned in scholarship, it's usually over $2 million in scholarship collectively that they report having been awarded on the scholarship side. So our students do tend to fare very well in the scholarship process. They know that SMU has such a strong academic preparation when those universities, especially in the US, look at our transcripts and know the student is coming from our school. They know how to interpret that. They know what that looks like. That's a big part of the other part of my job when I'm not working with students is often working with universities and colleges, and in some cases the travel piece is where that comes in. So with the US in particular, the application process is very involved. They look at students in a holistic manner. So they look at the student transcript from grade 9 through to whatever is the most current record for them. So typically that's the fall of their grade 12 year, their first term report. So what we do as university counselors is we host those colleges when they come to our campus when they want to see it. Because very often the person who comes to visit our campus, who comes to make a presentation to our students, is also the person who reads the application for students from our school. So it's really important to us to actually get to know those people, to exchange information with them so they know a little bit about SMU and they know what it means when a student is taking AP French or advanced bio. They know that's a pretty tough course here. Those are challenging educational experiences that student is having. In the US, some of the selective US colleges in particular are very focused on seeing that students are challenging themselves and are really seeking out the most rigorous opportunities. So one thing that those US colleges like is they look at our transcript and they say, oh yeah, we know that they take the quote-unquote regular classes, the provincial curriculum at our school, and it is an enriched environment, and it is a challenging experience at those senior years. So we work really hard to maintain those relationships. Sometimes that pays off. It's paying off for me at the moment because I'm going to Abu Dhabi next week for 4 days to go and see an NYU campus over there. So it's a great way for me, anytime we get a chance to go and visit a college, it's so informative because it means that you actually have that experience of what it feels like to be on that college. And it's so much easier when a student comes back for me to be able to then say, oh, no, I've been there. I can imagine this would be a good fit for you, and here's why. And that plays out each year in our office. I know that all of us have conversations with students about, they'll come and they'll say, oh, I'm thinking about this, this, and this in terms of colleges. And you'll say, nah, I don't know. I've been there, and I'm not so sure that that's the right feeling. Or maybe somebody else in the office will have been there, and I'll say, go and talk to Mr. Humphreys. He's been to Johns Hopkins, and he loved it. He'll show you pictures, and he'll talk to you about it. So it's a really, for us, especially with the US college system, but also with the Canadian system, when students don't have a chance to visit, it's such a great way for us to be able to talk about the colleges and the universities. When we've actually been there, when we've met some of the people in the office, when we have a person on the end of the phone that we can call and say, what about this? This is the situation I'm in. This is whether it's an academic situation or it's a social situation that I have with a student, that I need to find the right kind of place for it. When we have those relationships with the schools, the colleges and universities, we're able to actually help that process along a little bit. So that is, it's why I have a great job. So I think so. We work with students at every grade level. We have, in the senior school, we do talk with them about some of the preparation pieces. And I have, I'll give you, this is just a planning ahead document that is, that we can give to students. So it's just to give you an idea of the kinds of messages that we would give to students about how to plan ahead for university, what to think about. Pass them on the other side. So we really encourage students to think ahead, that's part of the ethos of the school. And I think it's something that a lot of parents come to the school knowing that that's part of the message that we're going to get. In the United States in particular, there's been quite a lot of research recently on middle school students, actually, and on getting middle school students involved in the US in the college-going process and in the idea of actually going to college. And they know that they could see in these empirical studies that they see that there is a significant impact on the likelihood of a senior, a grade 12 student going to college if they were exposed to even to talk about college in their middle school years and in their early high school years. So they have that chance to think about it and to talk about it. My poor children are inundated with it, I'm sure, because they hear me talk about it all the time, because I talk about work and I talk about what I'm doing or what my students are doing and the experiences that they're having. But I think it's just part of the conversation at my house, because that's what I do. But it's definitely something that I would encourage you to do, and to talk with your kids about what the options are. Not even any one particular option, but to get students thinking about what are the options. And if you want to have options and you want to have these great opportunities that they hear about when they start hearing about the kinds of things that kids from our school do, what can they do to actually make that happen? So we know that there's some things that students can do. We talk with them about their academic program. We talk with them about the choices they make in their academic program and how to ensure that they're lined up so that they are going to making choices that are going to leave the doors open that they want to leave open. That doesn't mean that every door has to be left open for every child, but it does mean that if they think, well, I might like to do this or that, then we're going to try and counsel them to help them figure out what's the best pathway through the senior school so that you can get there and still have the options that you want to have. We talk with them a lot about their involvement, especially in the early, when grade 9 and grade 10. What are the things that you like to do? How do you like to spend your time? What do you like to do on the weekend in your leisure time? And that's just to encourage kids to think about the kinds of things that they like doing, because what we know is that typically students will do better in things that they like, things that they enjoy. So if they can figure out what it is that turns their crank and that makes them want to get out of bed in the morning and go and do it, that's the thing that we encourage them to do. For some students, that's rowing. For some students, that's rugby. For other students, it's chemistry, or it's literature, or it's writing, or it's stage performance. It could be anything, but we really encourage them to figure out what they like and then to go and do it. That's great on the university in terms of what you might like to do at university, but it's also great on the application side, and that's part of our role, is to try and help them through that application piece. Some of those highly selective schools, especially the US schools that some of our kids are really keen on, they are looking for certain kinds of students. They want students who have that strong academic preparation, which they're able to get here at our school. And they're also looking for students who can fill all these other niches that they need in their class. So when they're building, in the US system, they talk about building a class, and they look to make sure that they have students who can play the tuba in the orchestra, and who can be on the rugby field, and who can be part of the badminton team, or maybe sing in the a cappella choir. So they look to make sure that the students have the profile that they're looking for to fill in that spot. We don't have quite that. That doesn't happen quite the same way in Canada at all institutions, but it's certainly starting to happen at some institutions. So UBC, for example, is the first major institution that has expanded their application process to include what's called a personal profile. So students have to submit their marks, but they also have to submit their leadership, evidence of their leadership ability, some detail of 5 activities that they're involved in, and then they have to choose one and talk about what it means to them, what is the meaning and the learning that they've gotten from that activity. So we are seeing that even at UBC now, it's not just about whether you have the marks to get in, but are you the person they also want in the class, and do you fill some of these roles that they're looking to fill at the university? And that means that not everyone who has an average above 88% gets in anymore. It used to be that's the way it works at many Canadian universities. They set the bar, what their standard is for admission. You have the academic average in 4 subjects, you get in. You don't have it, you don't get in. UBC is changing that, and other universities have followed suit, and there's a few universities that definitely do it a little bit differently. So it is something that I think is likely to happen. What they see as at the university level is that the admission averages, or the averages that students are getting in their academic courses from their high school, when there's no provincial exams to kind of drop them down again, the averages are just climbing and climbing and climbing. And as the demand for higher academic averages is needed by the university, so too the demand is met at the high school level with academic averages that are increasing. So at SFU now, you need a 90% average to get into science at Simon Fraser University. So at some point, they're limiting what they say is they feel that they're limiting the kind of student that they can take at their university, and they don't want a university that's just full of students who are able to get 90 or over 90% in sciences. They want to have this blend of students on their campus. So we encourage students to really think about what can you do now that will help you to make those opportunities possible for you down the road. So we've had students who have been hugely successful in one guy who graduated a couple years ago who won the Toyota Earth Day Scholarship because he made a movie about tar sands. He happened to really like making movies, but he also happened to be really passionate about environmental science. So we made this movie and did very well, was able to take that scholarship with them off to university to study. We have kids who get in to study at universities in part because they have fantastic athletics ability. So they're rowers, or they're squash players, or they're rugby players, or they're soccer players, basketball players, and they're playing at Canadian institutions or internationally in the United States or even in Britain. So we have students that are going and doing really neat things because they've cultivated this something, whatever it is, whether it's their sport or whether it's their academics. In Britain, one of the things that we know about the UK system is that typically they're looking for students who have really cultivated an interest in their academic subject, whatever it is the academic subject that they want to study at the university. They're not so interested in all the extracurriculars that students are encouraged to do here at our school or schools like ours. They're very interested in what students are doing that fits really closely with the field of study that they want to do at the university in Britain. So those students often will encourage them, if they think they might like to go to Britain, we'd encourage them to really think about what are the intellectual things that you're doing that fit with that program that you want to study. So whether it's extra competitions, or it's just subscribing to one of the journals, or subscribing to a specific newspaper that fits with the program of study that they want to carry on with. Those are the kinds of intellectual activities that the British universities. That's sort of the bent that they have. The US is often looking for that well-rounded, all-rounded kind of experience with students. So we work really hard with students to try and encourage them to think about what do they like, what are they passionate about, how do they want to spend their time, and then to find something that they want to spend their time doing and to do it in a meaningful way and over a certain period of time. We know that students are so busy doing all kinds of things here, which is great, but we often have to get them to pull from all those things that they do and say, okay, what's the thing that you get the most out of, that you give the most to, but that you get the most out of as well, that you get the most learning out of, and that you feel is the best example of your leadership, out of your involvement in something. And so that's very often the thing that we get students to try and focus on is to try and narrow it down. That doesn't always mean that they limit their activities. It just means that they might go a little bit more deeply into one area and find themselves hopefully in some kind of leadership or organizational role within that area. And then that's something that they can use as well for those applications. It's a lot of information. Try not to give it too much. So I'll leave that with you. There's lots of ideas on there. Those are the kinds of things that we talk to students about to encourage them to think about what they can do now to prepare for later. And at the same time, we really encourage them to keep everything in balance and to recognize that they are still 12 or 13 or 14. And even some of my 17-year-olds, it's just the stage that they're at. And they have to keep that in balance. And if that's not the right balance for them, then they need to kind of right that ship in some way. So we do also want them, as much as I want them to use binoculars and look down the road and see what's out there, I also want them to recognize that there's blades of grass in front of them and they've got to keep those in focus too. And that you do have to get your homework done now, and you cannot spend all your time doing the thing that you love the most if you're not going to pass Science 10. So we do also really try to get students to know what their own sense of balance is, what's important in their life, what do they need to make time for, so that they can be healthy and happy and balanced kids as they go through their high school years, and not stressed and not so fixated on the end game that they can't enjoy the journey as they're going along. There's my spiel about the balance. Parents. So this is where you come in. You've had a lot to do, obviously, and you have more to do over the next few years. The big piece, I think, for me is just encouraging you to talk to your students and to your children about the possibilities. What did you do? How did you make those decisions? What went wrong? That's a great thing for kids to hear if you are willing to admit to having failed a class or dropped out at some point or decided that this was the wrong path and I need to switch gears and go over here and I need to restart. All of those experiences, they're going to learn from that. I tell them all the time about, failing first year finite mathematics until the very end, and then I got 82% of the final, so I didn't fail the course. But I failed everything up to that point, because I think it's important for them to hear that's going to happen, that is part of life, and that is part of learning, and that's part of what's going to happen when you go to university. And so we encourage them, I encourage you to have those conversations with your kids and let them explore some of those possibilities of what might happen once they get there, as well as talking with them about what the reality is. So if it's different, we know that it's different for every family about what the possibilities are for students at the end. Some families, it's possible to go to the United States and support kids through 4 years of post-secondary in the United States, which varies depending on where you go and whether you have in-state tuition or have a home down there or any of those things. But it could vary anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 a year. In Canada, tuition is typically at the average Canadian university. I think the average tuition at the moment is about $5,500 a year. It ranges though as well. The lowest tuition is in Memorial University of Newfoundland, which is about $2,500 a year. The highest tuition that I'm aware of at the moment at the undergraduate level is actually at the University of Waterloo, where it's about $11,000 a year for engineering. Typically, it's around 7. That's pretty common, I think, for depending on the program and depending on the university. But 7 is not a bad benchmark. Residence on top of that is about $8,000 a year, $8,000 to $10,000 a year. Sometimes it depends on how much your child eats. Some universities you have to get a big meal plan or a small meal plan, and some universities you just have a meal plan and you can eat whatever you want. It's a buffet style, so that's a choice for some students. So it's typically for Canadian university about $20,000 per year all in if they were to go away to university. Of course, if they go up the road to UVic and they live at home, which about last year I think we had 26 students go to UVic out of a grad class of 140. So that's a pretty common experience as well, that students choose to stay in Victoria. We have students go to Camosun every year, and we have students go to UVic every year. And of course, then it's just the tuition, and that would usually at UVic is about $6,000 or $7,000 a year for tuition at UVic at the moment. So SFU is a great institution. It's one of those ones that I think flies under the radar. UBC kind of overshadows it in its in its position there on the Lower Mainland, but it's one of the things that SFU has done really well in the last few years is they've really done a great job with what they call their career services. So they've produced some really neat videos, and they gave me this video. It's actually, they haven't released it yet, but they said I could show it to you. I showed it last week as well, so I'm sorry that it's a repeat for a couple of you. But it's a great little video about, for parents, so this is you have to put yourself sort of into the perspective of a parent who's got a son or daughter who's just starting university. And it's trying to help parents understand what the university experience is like in terms of thinking about what that next step is in the career path. I often talk to students and they have a career path that they're interested in. Very often it's a career path that one of their parents has or one that they're very familiar with. And sometimes it's something totally different, but then sometimes there are students who come in with an idea that this is what they're going to get to. And what SFU talks about in this video, and it's only 2 minutes, and in a lot of literature, what we read in the newspapers, what we see in the Maclean's magazine when they write up the universities, is that path to career is so not linear anymore. It's very much, it's something that happens, it evolves over time, and especially over the time that they're doing their undergraduate or graduate work afterwards. So this little video is to try and help frame that for parents who are where you will be probably 6 years from now. So I hope the sound doesn't come blasting out. I did have it set up, but we'll see.
So your son or daughter has just been accepted into university. Congratulations. A university education can be excellent preparation for the type of career opportunities available in the future. Here's the tricky part. Many of us think that career success happens in a clean, predictable way. The reality is, for most of us, life looks a little more like this. So what's a parent to do? First, try not to predict the future. Your child will have many opportunities to grow and develop during their time at school. That comes with pursuing a degree and engaging in career activities. Steve Jobs said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. You have to trust that the dots will somehow connect to the future." So how can you help your son or daughter create and connect for their futures? Encourage them to take action, to explore ways of engaging with their community, to create their own set of dots. At university, this involves seeing the degree as more than a series of courses. It involves learning beyond the classroom and seeing opportunities outside of school as a critical part of their university experience. These experiences can help students make connections between their studies and life outside of school. It will help them understand the types of environments they are best suited for, while giving them a real sense of what the working world is like and how it is changing. Not to mention, they'll develop concrete experiences and connections that can lead to future opportunities. You can't predict what the future might hold, but encouraging your child to take every opportunity to create their own dots gives them the best chance for connecting to a world of possibility in the future, whatever that future might look like.
It's a short video, but it does a really good job, I think, of helping visually to portray what it looks like for kids now and what students experience when they go to university and have to figure out what those dots are and how they're going to put them together. I think that for me, when I watch that, in a way, the senior school for sure it feels like an experience, is a little bit like the experience at university in terms of encouraging students to look outside, take advantage of maybe an exchange opportunity, or look at the service projects that students might go and do some international travel with, or getting involved and working, even the students who I see working on campus, who are going around and gathering experiences as they get through their high school years. So our role with University Counselling is to try and help students make the most of these 4 years that they have with us in the senior school in particular, in grade 9 through 12, and hopefully launch them into figuring out what that dream is for them when they finish, and then making it reality that they can actually get there and do what they want to do when they end. Do you have any questions? You've been very quiet, which is fine. Oh, great.
You made a comment earlier about using as an example SFU's percent of 90, I guess, to get into their program in science. I guess as an example of you advising, if someone was, say, targeting physics and they had the option in grade 11 planning for grade 12 to take 12 physics versus, say, AP physics or something. And the expectation or the averages that they could look at from previous data was that those that took the AP on average got, only
didn't fare quite as well.
Got into the 90s and 30% got into whatever. So what would be the option there? I mean, are the universities going to be looking at, should they take that lower level of physics and
that's
do really well? Or?
Yeah, that's a question that students and I talk about very often. And a lot of it comes down to, well, there's two things. There's a lot of things. One is knowing what the student wants. So if the student, if she knows that she wants to go to college in the United States, then they value seeing AP physics on the transcript as a course that a student is taking, because that's that evidence of having taken the most rigorous coursework available to you, which is their standard.
95 in AP versus a 95 in the physics 12.
And that's the conversation I have with them, is to say that for some students, they're going to get 95 whichever physics they take. But for the students where they have to really work hard to get that 85 or that 90, sometimes for those students, the right choice is to take the provincial course. Now, the caveat to this is that when our students take AP Physics, for example, they also get a Physics 12 credit. So they also get a BC Physics 12 credit that the teachers calculate separately from the AP course, so that students are able to get credit in both, because they cover the learning outcomes of our provincial grade 12 curriculum and they cover the learning outcomes of AP Physics. That happens in our physics courses and calculus and English. They have two numbers, actually. They have a physics number, they have Physics 12 number, and they have an AP Physics. So for example, for SFU, they would take whichever was higher in that case. They would take one of those two marks and they'd take whichever one is higher. But that doesn't account for the fact that that AP Physics course is a lot of work, and students have to learn that material more material in a shorter period of time. So that's the conversation that I have with students. And sometimes my advice to them, knowing where they want to go, or that especially if they want to go to schools where it's a mark-based admission, or that they're really trying to maximize perhaps their scholarship opportunities, sometimes those students will decide that the best choice for them is to take the Physics 12 and perhaps not have as heavy a course load, and perhaps get a higher mark in that. That's not a sure thing, of course, because sometimes students do better in courses where they're more challenged and where they're more pressed. But and that, I think, for me, it's very much an individual conversation that I have with each kid. When I know the student well enough and I feel like I can have that conversation and say, you know what, I think this might actually be the best option for you, but I'll support you whichever you want to do, but I think this might be better to maximize your success by taking the provincial curriculum. That's a good question. It's a tricky answer. It's a fine line to walk. Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions? Yeah, go for it.
I always have lots of questions.
Okay.
At what stage, at what grade would you advise for the students to really start putting aside their, I'd love to play soccer, continue to play soccer, versus, really buckling down and being good in athletics can fit well in some of
Yeah,
these formulas,
for
be
sure.
it a scholarship or whatever,
Yeah.
but at what point do you really start stressing to the student to go for the community, the leadership, the other components?
I think I'm trying to think a lot of times that happens naturally for students at some point or another during their experience through whichever activity they're involved in. I think generally though, when I'm talking with students as they're leaving grade 10 or in the beginning of grade 11, I think that's often when I have that conversation with them, is to encourage them to say, okay, how are you going to distinguish yourself in this area? What is it that you want to do? And for some, it really is such an individual process, and that for some students, their way of distinguishing themselves is by being the best teammate they can be. And for other students, it's about being the captain, or it's about, showing up in a different way. So it's such a unique experience, and some kids are ready for it earlier than others to take on those leadership responsibilities. But it's certainly something that I think if kids are looking at again, kind of maximizing their potential for opportunity, grade 11 is a good year that gives you sort of 2 years to really come to fruition in your highest capacity within that activity. Some kids do that in grade 9 though. I see some students who come out in grade 9 and they just knock your socks off with something, and you think, wow, you're in grade 9 and you're up there and you're organizing the whole school to do something in assembly or to pull something out. And I think I couldn't imagine doing that at grade 9. I have a hard time picturing some of my current grade 9 students doing that, but others, no problem. So very individual. And that's, I think, if there's anything to leave you with in terms of the idea of the kind of support that we want to offer through university counseling and academic advising, is that we do really try and personalize it and make it very individual. That's definitely the pendulum swinging in education as well, in terms of that idea of personalized learning and individualized education plans. But that certainly is the way that we're approaching it as well. Excuse me.
Speaking of the pendulum swing, at a population level, what are the trends in terms of demand and supply to get into university? And what are the thresholds for, the minimum acceptance into? I think back 30 years ago when I was applying for university, I think the threshold for acceptance was quite different than it is now, with the 90% to get into SFU science. And so at a macro level, I also appreciate that maybe depending on what other opportunities are available in the economy in terms of jobs and whatnot. So what's going on at the big picture level?
I think in terms of demand, what we see each year is that the big name universities, the big research intensive universities in Canada, so McGill, UBC, University of Toronto for sure, Queen's, those schools that have a really well-known brand, they are always going to be very popular, and the threshold for getting in is quite high. It's mid 80s is quite the minimum, I would say, for a lot of those programs at those universities. There are absolutely great universities you can go to in Canada where the average for getting in is 75 or 77. UVic is among them. UVic's average has increased significantly over the years. It's now sort of in the low 80s. UVic, interestingly, the most difficult, the program that has the highest admission average at UVic. Anyone want to guess what program it is? Business? Any other guesses? It's creative writing. 88% is the admission average you need to get into the creative writing program at UVic. And that's the highest admission average that's required at UVic. The other programs are 86, 84, 82, but creative writing, and it's because it's the supply and demand. It is such a great program. It's very well known across Canada, and it's very well established. So it's really, there's a lot of variation from place to place. There are certainly enough spots for universities, there are enough spots for students in universities across Canada. So much so that, in fact, there's lots of universities that are really, even in BC, they said that they're going to increase the number of international students in our universities by, I think, 50%. Part of that is a financial, economic reality. And part of it is that demographics, fewer children, fewer students going to university, more spreading out when people go to university, so that, the prediction factor of that everyone will go at 18 is a little bit different now. Students are going and taking gap years and doing other things and then coming back to it later in life, or taking a very kind of haphazard approach to their university studies. It's not always 4 years and then out the other side. It might be 6 years or 8 years, depending on how students go through it. So there's certainly spots for students who want to find them, that's for sure. And the general admission, like each university, what they do is they set a minimum admission standard for general admission requirements, and very often it's 70 or 75%. That's the university, no matter what program you're going into, you must meet this minimum standard. That's their standard admission. What then happens is that within each program or faculty that students are considering, that admission average changes depending on the number of students that apply for those spots and the admission average of the students coming in to those spots. So we'll see those admission averages will change. They'll set the bar really high, say in the fall, and then we'll see that in February they've dropped it a couple of percent because they've got that many students, and then they drop it a couple more percent in May, and then they'll let a few more in the gate. So it's definitely a different sort of approach. The college system is one. Where in Canada, the community colleges, typically the cost of tuition at the community college is still about half of what it is at university. That's pretty standard. They're just more funded, and they're not supporting research programs because they typically don't do as much, or if any, research. Some colleges do none, others do some. So yeah. Yes?
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Do you publish the requirements of admission for different institutions somewhere on the bulletin board so kids can actually come up and look at it, or?
Yeah, we use an electronic bulletin board. We use Moodle, which I think a lot of your middle school students will have been using. So we have a graduation transition planning site, which is on the Moodle site. And what we do is we put the links to the universities for Canadian universities that do posts. They're called cutoffs. So we put links up so students can see those admission averages. There is also one website. I do wish that they would do this nationally, but at the moment it's just Ontario, called electronicinfo.ca, and they post on there the admission average for every Ontario university and every program at every Ontario university. Mm-hmm. So students can see it.
And what sort of timeline the kids in middle school, they have no idea what they're
I don't know what color socks they're going to wear tomorrow. Mine don't anyway.
Well, parents are at home. We are trying to do our part in terms of explaining things, encouraging them, and supporting them. I wanted to know exactly how the school is providing tool sets for these kids to be available. They would come in and say, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know. But how are you going to help them?
So what we do with university counselors do and academic advisors is we see all the grade 9s in HCE. So are you familiar with HCE, Health and Career Education? Yeah. So HCE 9 carries on the way it had been in 6, 7, and 8. And so we go into those classes and we talk to them about, and we just go in to talk about the education and career learning outcomes. So for example, when I go into the grade 9 classes, I talk to them about, we talk about university. So what is university? What's an undergraduate degree? How long does it take you? What's a bachelor's degree? What does that mean? And we talk about different faculties: science, engineering, arts, fine arts, music, whatever the big spread of universities are. We also talk about what a master's degree is and what a PhD is, and it's always entertaining when they say, really? It only takes 2 years to get a master's degree? But that's better than an undergraduate degree. So we talk about all that. And the PhD, the 3 years for a PhD, I say is really a myth, but no one's gonna get a PhD really in 3 years unless they're, a rocket scientist. So we try and we give them kind of lay the foundation. This is what university post-secondary options look like. We talk about, because they hear and they will see things about universities coming. And I do have grade 9 students, for example, who come to university presentations. We have round about 50 university presentations on our campus each year, usually at lunchtime. And students will come and they'll sit down and they'll be in grade 9 and they'll want to know what it's like to, when the guy comes from Colgate University in the United States, or we have people coming from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland next week. And they come and they listen and they hear. So there's a little bit of it happens by osmosis, I think. The direct stuff happens in HC 9 and then again in Planning 10, which is the sort of the carry on from HCE. It turns in grade 10 to planning, which everyone has to take.
That's where they will actually start planning.
Yeah, that's right. They start in researching the possibilities and they look at what are the requirements. So if I want to go and do engineering, what do I need to know about to get into engineering? Okay, I need to do physics and chemistry and calculus. So then they back it up and they say, okay, in grade 11, I need to do physics 11 and chem 11, and in grade 12, I need to add calculus to that list. So we do that with the students in grade 10. Again, the academic advisors go in, we do 6 or 7 classes with the kids, we get them to think about, we also along the way have them, they do a couple of career inventories where they look at their likes and their dislikes and their preferences, and the computer spits out some suggested kind of pathways for them, which is always interesting. They find that very entertaining when it tells them what they might consider. They also do some personality tests that also give them some career guidance and career information at the end of it. And then we have conversations with them either on the fly in the classroom or when they come and they make an appointment and they say, you know, I'd just like to chat about some of these things. And we're there to do that with students all along the way. In grade 11 and 12, we meet with students in grade 11 for half the year and in grade 12 for half the year, just once every 2 weeks in it's called a GTP, Grad Transition Plan class. And then we really look at the nuts and bolts of, okay, what's the application involved? What do you need to do? Have you asked me for a reference letter? Have you asked your teachers for reference letters? So we try and help make sure that all those benchmarks are met along the way so they can complete those applications.
And each child is assigned to a specific academic advisor throughout.
And they stay with that same person throughout, yeah.
So the whole entire process of application will be somehow monitored by these advisors.
What's one of the other shifts in this whole university process is that the application side of things is very much placed in the hands of the student now. It used to be that the university that we would have a lot more to do with it because it was paper. We might have to sign off on it, or we would actually physically send it for them. We don't do any of that now because everything's done with a credit card and a keyboard. And so but what we do is we make sure that they have listed where they want to go, that we've looked, they come and they definitely know who to come to, because they certainly come and they'll say, I don't know how to fill this form out online. And we look at the forms with them online and make sure that they have all the steps. They get all the communication though, it's all electronic. So everything comes through email. There are very few. There's still some US colleges that do the sort of thick and thin envelopes. They used to say that if you get a thick envelope, you're getting in, because that means you've got all the admission and registration package. You get a thin envelope, it's a rejection letter. Now it's just an email in your inbox. So we help students decipher those emails sometimes, and we certainly help to make sure that they're, as much as we can, that they're on track and are going to, get things submitted on time with reminders that you need to get this in. So.
We could get the option to be BCC'd or at least.
Yes. Well, interestingly, what some students do is they actually have they use their parents' email account instead of using their own email account for communication, because then everybody can see it. And actually, it's not. There's some parts of me say, no, you're going to have to do this on your own. And then there's other part of me that says, you know what, that is just realistic. You are not going to get through all those emails. So sometimes I've seen students and parents will set up an email account that they'll use jointly just for the university stuff. And then that way everybody has access to the same information, they can see the same deadlines, they can see the same requests for information, and then and then someone else can remember their passwords for them as well. That's very handy, because every website for every university has a different combination of letters and numbers and exclamation marks you need for your password, and it's hard to track. So I would encourage you to get involved, and certainly the academic advisor, that whoever is assigned to your son or daughter, would be, you could just get in touch with them and say, we are in this together and we need help. Some parents say, you know what, this is their thing and they're going to go and do it, and I am good with that. And other parents want to be fully engaged in the process, and we're happy to work with whatever comes our way.
I got one.
Okay.
How is athletics evaluated?
How is it?
How is it evaluated? How does someone go about making that part of their university?
So we have, I mentioned, we have 2 people attached to our department, one who does scholarships specifically, and we have one person who's working just with students who we call her the athletic counselor. So she works with students who are wanting to play athletics at the post-secondary level, and she supports students through that process, right? Usually the call goes out at the spring of grade 10 for any students who are interested in kind of going down that path, because we know that especially with the US, but even with the CIS, the Canadian university system, we know that it is a process, and it is something that you have to kind of engage with quite early in some sports, especially to meet with coaches, to have the stats that you need, to have the video footage, to have to be able to kind of start that conversation and start that relationship with that coach. So Nikki Kaufman is the woman who does that. She's one of our PE teachers and coaches, but she also played for 5 years at University of Victoria on the women's soccer team, and has really done a great job this year of supporting. There's about I think about a dozen students in grade 12 who are looking at post-secondary kind of tied with their athletics. So that's something that it will depend on the university, exactly how it's evaluated, like the value of that involvement. But it's certainly something when you're looking at the CIS level or looking at one of those Div 1 schools in the United States or Div 2 schools that have a particular niche for something, that's part of the application process. So they look at you as a student athlete if you're applying that way, and the coach, if you've got that relationship with the coach, and we try and help students and parents very often get involved in the athletic piece for sure, because there is so much communication that happens between coaches and kids. And so we try and make sure that everybody's got all the right information. The coach then can, if the coach wants you, what happens is the coach then can also be an advocate for you at the admission, at the decision about admission. And that's happening right now with one of my students for SFU, for example. We have that happening with students at UBC. We've had it happen with students in the United States at Dartmouth and Princeton and Cornell and Stanford and all the lots of big name universities, as well as smaller schools that are not as don't have that big reputation, but have fantastic performance in certain sports that our kids are keen to go and do. So it can be can have a big sway in the admissions decisions for some students, for sure. Yes, Bab.
So when I think back 30 years or a little longer in high school, having the career counselor and my own family culture, and it was very much I'm going to go to university, and I was exposed to hear the different fields of studies, and but it was never discussed. Well, what happens after that? And what do the jobs and the careers actually look like?
Yeah.
And if you become an example, a doctor, you're actually a business person as well as a physician, right?
Yeah.
Or there's entrepreneurship. You can explore an idea this way. I mean, I had no clue, and I didn't really think about it until I got out of university, and I kept kind of staying in the university system through postgraduate and to find my way. And I just keep thinking if people had talked to me in my high school years and really exposed me to a huge number of possibilities.
Yes.
I don't know where I would have ended up, but I somehow feel I would have been served better. So it's not, these aptitude tests kind of, I remember having one of those too, and you could be a this, that, or the other, and it kind of threw me off track a little bit. It was, there's got to be a richer way of really talking to kids. So I'm looking just for your,
So one of the things that we've done for the 5 years I've been here is we've organized a career week each year. Often it's been actually this next week that tied in with Alumni Weekend. This year we did it in January, where we bring in alumni, we bring in parents, we bring in people from the community. It could be any combination of those people to come in and talk about what they do and what does it look like to actually do that job, and how do you do it, and what is that, and how has it changed. We ask them to talk about what their pathway has been. So how did you end up in that job? Because very often there's very little connection between my master's degree in French literature and what I'm talking to you about today. So, to have that sense that, okay, how is this gonna, how's this path gonna go, and what are some of the possibilities? So that's one way we try and get students thinking about it. And certainly at the post-secondary level, they talk a lot about that. And Canada's got such a great tradition of the co-op experience that's something that students are really encouraged to do, and we certainly encourage students to do, because that is a great way to find out whether you want to do a job or not, and whether you want to be involved in it. So co-op, work placements, internships. One of my American kids today, she's just graduating this spring, but she came to me today because she was so excited because she got an internship this summer for 8 weeks in a hospital in Portland, Oregon, where she lives. We encourage students to kind of go and find those opportunities. One of the things I think on that little checklist I gave you there is think about your summer experiences, whether that's work or whether that's volunteering or whether it's just an experience. It might be going and doing an outward bound course, but something that helps you to kind of round out your understanding of what are the possibilities and what might you want to do down the road. So we are, yes, university counselors, but we do talk about that other stuff too, because it's part of it. As you say, if you don't know it's even possible, then it's hard to imagine, which is partly the message in the SFU, that some of these things are just hard to imagine. What the possibilities are going to be 10 years from now. A lot of those careers. One of the careers that they had was like Mars taxi driver, essentially. It was like be a chauffeur in Mars. But they said, well, 20 years from now, that's what's going to be happening. People are going to be going and having these other opportunities, and they're going to need people who can do that kind of stuff. So it seemed very far-fetched, and yet it was very well researched. Anyway, I'll leave you with that. This will be up on the website in case you want to do it again. And you have the paperwork in hand. If you want any more information or specific information, please feel free to get in touch with me. I didn't put my contact information anywhere, but it will be on the website, so you can get in touch with me that way. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes and answer them. Thanks for coming.